Okay, so we're being live streamed.
Okay.
Okay. So, good morning. And welcome to, I think this is the fourth Waste Not forum, or is the fourth of the series of Waste Not events that we have been having. And not sure if it's going to be the last one, but certainly this is an important step because we've been talking about many things that are on the micro level, but this session is moving it to the macro. We're looking at what government, municipalities, what's being done on a larger level to get to zero. How are we racing to zero? How are we meeting zero waste by 2050, 2030, whatever the target is, which you will hear a little bit more about. So we want to welcome everybody here. It promises to be a very interesting 2 hours. I want to thank our co-sponsors. We have, and they've been our co-sponsors all the way through the series. We want to thank Assembly members Alicia Heineman and Khalil Anderson, Council members Selvina Brooks Powers and Natasha Williams, Queensborough President Donovan Richards, and QSWAB. And because without their support, we wouldn't have been as successful as we've been so far. And hopefully we're going to say this event is successful. So welcome to everyone. And I am going to turn this over to Gloria Boyce Charles, our illustrious chairperson of this committee. Gloria.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this Saturday morning. We really appreciate that. And we feel so honored and blessed, really, to be joined today by esteemed agency, legislative, and community members who are really passionate about sustainability and zero waste and clean communities. So we have a packed agenda. We want to hear from our panelists, our guest speakers. And so I'm not going to take a whole lot of time up front. I want us to get right into the meat and potatoes, but I do want to kind of share with you the agenda for the day. The way that we've set up today is that we're going to have 2 panels. The first panel is going to be one where we try to level set. What is zero waste? People use the term a lot, but do we really understand what it means? Zero waste to what, And so our first panel is comprised of Commissioner Jessica Tisch from the New York City, newly appointed commissioner from the New York City Department of Sanitation, Assembly member Steve Engelbright, representing the New York Assembly District 4, also the chair of the New York State Assembly Committee on Environmental Conservation, and City Council member Sandy Nurse, representing New York City Council District 37 and chair of the Committee on Sanitation and Solid Waste Management. So these are the people in our first panel who will walk us through what zero waste means, where we are with it, what the wins have been, what the challenges have been, and the likelihood of reaching zero waste goals. And then we'll open the floor up for questions and answers, because we want to give our audience members an opportunity to engage with these very informed people in this particular space. We'll hear a little bit after that from any of our co-sponsors who are on the forum this morning. They'll take a minute or two to share some words with us. And then we'll go into our second panel. And that panel is comprised of people in our communities, activists who've taken it upon themselves, who represent their organizations, have taken it upon themselves to really dive into the actual activities that are needed in order to make sure that we have clean communities, beautiful communities, and that we support zero waste initiatives and sustainable communities. So that's how the morning will go. Questions and answers after that panel. And then we'll end and think in terms of what next steps will be. So we have lots of information to share with you today. We look forward to a great conversation, and thank you so much for joining. So one thing I want to point out is we don't introduce the biographical statements of our presenters because they're so prolific. And what we have done, though, is we've put a program in the chat. Please click on it to learn more about each of our participants, each of our speakers. Our panels are going to be moderated by our Waste Not Committee members. So each one will take a turn asking a question, and I'll begin. I'll ask the first question of our first panel. And so Commissioner Tisch, Assembly Member Engelbright, and City Council Member Nurse. This first question, I think I'll start off by addressing it to you first, Commissioner, since it's about an initiative that comes out of the Department of Sanitation. But I want you to all know that on the panel that we want to hear from each one of you on these questions. So the first question is, can you help us to understand better what zero waste is and why it's so important to have an initiative like this for New York City? What are some of the, as you answer the question, what are some of the wins with respect to the initiative? What are some of the challenges with following through on it? How likely is it that we will reach some of the key zero waste goals within the timeframes that have been set? Yeah, so that's basically where I'd like to begin. Commissioner?
Great, thank you for that question. So just to set the stage for everyone, in 2015, the former Mayor de Blasio, announced a goal of sending zero waste to landfills by 2030. That means, in part, we would divert a lot of the waste that ultimately ends up in landfills that otherwise could be recyclable. We know that there is a small but meaningful part of our waste stream that today is not recyclable, but that 80% or so of the waste stream that currently is recyclable. The goal of sending zero waste to landfills is to take that 80%, capture it all, and not send it to a landfill, but instead recycle it in the appropriate way. Today, our current diversion rate is 20.8%. That means only 20.8% of the approximately 80% that could be diverted from landfills is today being diverted. To give you a sense, that's up like 2 or 3% from when that goal was announced in 2015. So over, 7 years since the zero waste to landfills goal by 2030 was announced, so halfway through the period, the New York City has only made 2 or 3% progress. And so that clearly wasn't enough progress in those 7 years for me to sit here and say, like, yes, we are well on our way to achieving that goal. I am, just to be very clear with everyone, a very straightforward, honest person. So I'm just telling you like it is. I think you asked about challenges and successes. Let me start with metal, glass, plastic. Today, our capture rate is only 50%. 50% is okay, but if we're actually talking about sending zero waste to landfill in New York City, we have to capture way more than 50%. We have curbside collection of recyclables. That means that those recyclables are not being sorted in the households and making it into the appropriate bags. So I see that as an area around education where we really have to push. I also think organics is another like 30+% of the waste stream. Organics obviously represents the largest opportunity for contributing to the goal, just because it makes up such a big percent of the waste stream. And today, we're capturing less than 0.1% of organics. So we have a several-pronged strategy. And when I say several-pronged strategy, I mean like in my first 2 months as commissioner, these are the things we've announced. I don't want anyone to take this as this is the end state. I'm telling you what we have so far and what the ideas behind it are. So the first strategy is to invest in our youth, to roll out organics programs in every single New York City public school so that we develop the muscle memory with our kids. I will say in my kids' school, they do have an organics program. And when my kids come home or go to other kids' houses, they'll say to me, oh, they don't separate their organic waste. And I really think that it's important to train our kids early on so that for that generation, it's like the metal, glass, plastic for my generation. And I think that that's an important way of investing in the future. The second thing that we've announced, and it's a strategy I really want to double down on, are these organics bins across the city. So we've done a pilot of about 20 compost bins all clustered in one neighborhood in Astoria. And the idea behind clustering has been to put them together so that you make it easy for people to get rid of their organic waste so that they don't have to walk 30 blocks. So you don't only have the most motivated people doing it. And it's actually a strategy that's worked really well in Astoria. Every day, all 20 bins are full. And we've announced that we're going to be doing several hundred more organics bins. Some of them we're going to put in front of schools so that parents, when they're dropping their kids off, they want to drop their organic waste off in the bin, they can do that. But one thing that you'll definitely see a lot more of is the compost bins across the city, and looking forward this year to really doubling down on it. And then obviously, and I'll stop really soon because I know there are a lot of other panelists, like obviously there is this outstanding question of curbside organics. And to my mind, curbside organics is very important. The mayor has been very clear in his commitment to an organics program in the city, but he's also said that to roll out an organics program, it has to be first, one that people actually use, second, effective, and third, cost effective. And the numbers that we saw in our previous organics program showed that the program was neither effective nor cost effective. First, only 5.2% of addresses citywide even signed up for the organics program. And in the districts where we did see signups, we actually saw very low weekly participation. And so, and it was also quite expensive given the number of households, the low participation rates. So what we're doing now is rolling up our sleeves and trying to design a program that is both effective and cost effective for New Yorkers. And that is the work that I have ahead of me over the next several months.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, you raised some very, very critical points around the composting and the way we're handling organics. And I know that that's near and dear to a lot of our hearts and essential and critical to the zero waste initiative. I can imagine that there are some words that the council member Sandy Nurse and perhaps the Assembly member Engelbright might like to share. But we also are going to talk more about composting in the next question too. So keep that in mind. But council member, Assembly member, any thoughts on what the commissioner just shared or on the question of where we are with the zero waste initiative?
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm from Queens originally, by the way. I grew up in Queens and went to Bayside High School. And so this is a session that almost in a way brings me back home. And thank you for inviting me.
You
And
get
thank
points
you-
for that. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to Khalil Anderson for bringing this to my attention and helping the invitation to be accomplished. So let me just say I'm a geologist. I look at geological maps. If you look at the geological map that was produced of New York City in around the turn of the last century, there were expansive salt marshes, all fringing salt marshes all around Jamaica Bay and other parts of the city. And if you look at an aerial photo of those same areas today, you realize that we took care of our waste by dumping it into the salt marshes. We lost in Jamaica Bay alone more than 25,000 acres of tidal wetlands. There are some parts of South Queens that look like they're terrestrial. You can't see the water, but everything from where you're standing for southward toward the bay for a mile is fill from partially combusted waste and construction demolition debris. So I'm just to reinforce the commissioner's sense of difficulty with the magnitude of what we're dealing with. I just want to say that this is exactly on point. We have a huge problem. And I also want to point out, we now have state law that regulates the disposal of materials into tidal wetlands. It's not allowed anymore. So that option is off of the table. We're not going to be doing that anymore. In fact, in 1988, after Johnny Carson made fun of us all for the Islip garbage barge wandering around the hemisphere looking for a place, they thought South Carolina would take the waste. And then they tried South America, and it came back and it went to the Islip landfill. That humiliation led into the 1988 law that called for the closure of Long Island landfills. We have only 2 that are still open, and they're only supposed to be for construction and demolition debris. And they're both going to be closing. The Brookhaven landfill in my township of Suffolk is scheduled to close within the next 2 to 3 years. That would leave only the Babylon landfill. It'll close within 5 years. So this is not just a crisis for New York City. It is a crisis for the entire coastal region and beyond. And we are a crucible, really, and a prediction in a scientific model of what is going to happen everywhere because waste keeps coming. The zero waste concept then is really important because it's a complete evaluation of how we got into this difficulty and how we need to proceed to prevent having an insoluble problem. We need to reduce the waste. I want to speak in a moment to the composting for the organics. I think that's critically important. And I salute the commissioner for moving in that direction. But at the threshold, the packaging waste that is being produced and the plastic waste that is being produced in so many different species of plastics, many of which are not recyclable, they're not intermiscible, you can't melt them together. And some of them, such as the polyvinyl chloride plastics, are actually dangerous. If you try to incinerate them and you have partial combustion, the extremely carcinogenic chemical called dioxin is placed into the atmosphere. And so that really leads us to initiatives that we have begun to move toward at the state level through the committee that I chair on environmental conservation. I'll talk more about that if we have time, but let me just say it is important to reduce, reuse, and recycle in that hierarchy. And it's very important to reduce in the first instance. Let me just speak for a moment about the organics. The organics are recyclable, but and when I was a county legislator in Suffolk County some years ago, I saw this problem coming in, and I initiated a local law there to ban single-use plastics and to ban the plastic bags. And the reason, which is not necessarily well understood, the reason I was pushing for this was to push toward the composting. When you, my logic was that if you set out your waste in a plastic bag, it's very difficult, even if you've source separated it, and that was part of the vision, to source separate the organics, put them at curbside in a paper grocery sack, which is itself biodegradable. And to get everybody on board, there needed to be an education program. The commissioner has spoken to the difficulty of just ramping up a program without that education, without what she called the muscle memory of the young people. This needs to be something that is taught in the schools. It becomes a cultural expectation. But even if that's done, if there are no paper grocery sacks and no collection containers to hold them, to keep the neighborhood dogs off of the garbage overnight, you can't get there from here. And so that's the logic behind that law. It was passed, and then the lobby from the chemical and plastics industry came in and promised that they said, look, oh, okay, you've passed this law, but before it's copied all over the country, give us a chance to show that we're really good guys. We will voluntarily, and we promise, recycle all that polystyrene, the polystyrene that was used for single-use purposes such as plates in the cafeteria of the schools. And my colleagues said, oh, okay, we'll trust you. And that was the end of it. That was 30 years ago. Now we have a crisis that is pressing us to revisit this issue with a great deal of urgency.
And Assembly Member, may I respectfully
Surely.
ask you to hold on to some of that, because we do have
I know
a
you have
question
others,
for
so
you. Oh yeah, and we have a question for you about legislation and how that
Sure.
supports zero waste and addresses a lot of those issues. For sure, we're going to really cover that. So thank you very much. Okay. I want to give the council member Sandy Nurse just an opportunity to respond a little bit to her thoughts about the Zero Waste Initiative as a whole. Just to try to level set, and then we're going to move into some of that detail, Assembly Member, that you were talking about. Thank you so much.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me here. And thank you for all of you who are up on a Saturday talking about this. And I can't overstate the importance of Black leadership on this. So thank you to those of you in Southeast Queens for leading on this. So much has already been said, so I have very little to add. I mean, I think the commissioner laid it out very well, as well as the Assembly Member. I think on my end, it's focusing on the production piece and creating an environment, a regulatory environment that encourages producers to use things that are more easily recycled at municipal facilities, where with materials that have strong markets for the recycled pieces is really, really important. And so I hope at the state level, the effort for an extended producer responsibility bill can really come forward with a real strong framework. And, you know, on top of just the production piece, I think we do have a cultural challenge in terms of how do we get, you know, over 8 million people to participate in this effectively, to not have cross-contamination, to have really high levels of source separation. And that's a massive undertaking. And people have been putting so much of their time into that, both from agency levels to you know, advocacy groups to community groups. They're spending so much time and energy on this, and it is an immense challenge. And I think the goal is really to prevent things from coming to landfills, but also, and I saw in the chat, incinerators. That is a very, very important piece. And I know that for things that we can maybe talk about later, legislative wise, and making sure things aren't going to incinerators is going to be something we need to make sure is included. So I won't add much more because so much has been talked about, and I know we have a lot more to dive into, but all that to say is that I'm really encouraged by this body and the council. We've got some great legislation that has almost 40 people signed on to all of these pieces, and they're not perfect yet. We're gonna try to strengthen them, but I'm very encouraged by that. I'm encouraged by the commissioner's data-driven focus on how to make a program that works. And hopefully, if we can get great legislation at the state level, it potentially could unlock some incredible amounts of funds to really help us get there and address the other challenge, which is human behavior and getting us to adapt. So thank you.
Thank you. You know, I can see that this is really a highly charged and complex discussion, really. And as you can see by the chat, people have some strong feelings about these things and some really good questions. So I want to make sure that the panelists know that we do have questions for you about organics. That's coming up next. We do have a question for you about legislative initiatives around zero waste, and a question, if we can get to it, about containerization initiative that we understand is underway, and a pilot that's underway. So we do have those questions. I'm going to ask you to keep your responses to about 2 minutes, if you will. I don't mean any disrespect, but what I want to do is I want to ask these questions, level set, yes, but I want to get to the questions from the audience for sure. And I know that the commissioner has some time constraints as well. Okay, so next I'm going to turn the floor over to my colleague, Andrea Scarborough, and she is the vice chair for the Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board, lovingly known as QSWAB. And so she's going to ask the question on composting. Andrea?
Yes, hi, good morning. And thank you, panelists, for being here. Commissioner Tisch, I was truly encouraged to hear that there is a plan for a rollout of curbside organics. And as we do know that, and you can confirm this, Commissioner, we understand that there's a total of about 7 community boards in the boroughs of, I believe, Brooklyn, Manhattan, and the Bronx that continue to receive curbside composting service. And I guess my question is, what do you say to the rest of New York City, those residents that are so anxious to participate in a curbside organics program? Is there a time frame to move to a more viable and equitable, a more inclusive program? We here in Queens feel very neglected. Let's put it that way.
I will say that I am among those residents that, like you in Queens, that doesn't have access to curbside organics at my home, and I am equally eager for it. I think with curbside organics, we have one more shot, meaning we'd have to start and stop and start and stop. Like, next time this starts has to be the last time it ever starts, meaning whatever is rolled out has to work, and it has to work into the future. And so what I am doing now with my team is going through all of the details of all of the old programs, the ones where you had to sign up and you needed a brown bin, or you needed a certain number of interested addresses in your neighborhood. You know, we're going
Yeah.
through all of that stuff. And we're thinking like, all right, what worked and what didn't work?
Mhm.
And we are trying to design a program that will be effective and cost effective and one that people actually use. Because even in the districts that have signed up for the current program, the participation rates are abysmally low. Like let's take Brooklyn 1, for example. There are only 2,352 addresses signed up for the program, which is 15 or almost 16% of the addresses in Brooklyn 1. Of those addresses, only 13 actually have the service. 13% actually have the service.
Okay.
So it is very, very, very low now. And what we're trying to do is design a program that people will actually use.
Okay. So I know you can't share a time frame, but I would hope that it would be sooner rather than later in terms of the rollout. But Councilmember Nurse, what are your thoughts as to why this program has been so difficult to implement? And what are the City Council plans to address the current inequities that exist?
Yeah, so I think, the commissioner is right. The participation rates are low. And a lot of that has been named as the program being a voluntary opt-in versus the way we have recycling. Everyone's recycling or has the bin or is theoretically required to participate in that. And I think making this a mandatory program will be essential to getting those participation rates up. In one of our hearings, there were about the Deputy Commissioner Anderson mentioned that about 5,000 households that had signed up were not able to participate because maybe their landlord or their building manager didn't want to do it. People see it as additional work. And so we need to make something that is required. We, unfortunately, sometimes sticks and carrots are a part of how we move society forward and how we progress. I agree. We want something that works. And so in this round of budget, we kind of moved away from advocating for more money for something that has stopped and needs actually to be rethought and move towards a legislative approach. So we do have a bill was introduced for a universal curbside program by Councilmember Shahana Hanif. And it's got, 37 co-sponsors. We're really excited to have a hearing on it June 15th. I hope you all come and give us feedback on the actual legislation. It's on the council's website. I encourage you to read it, give us feedback, bring questions, bring ideas. And hopefully it's something that we can pass soon. And I think that would create the regulatory framework in which that gives, sanitation the green light to really aggressively figure out what a rollout can look like. So yeah, I think we have, I think that the main challenge is we need to create the systems and infrastructure that everyone can participate in. We've never had the brown bin in CV4 and in most of the district in which I represent. And so we've had a lot of, self-starting community groups. Myself, I also ran a composting operation because we didn't have one. So people are spending their time doing a public benefiting service in lieu of something. And so we really need to create something. And for me, I think the goal of zero waste is always a goal and a framework we should be moving towards. So sometimes it doesn't work, but we have to continue to go back to the drawing board and continue moving forward. And I think we have to push and not get deterred by certain setbacks. So I'm really hopeful that this council will pass that. And I know that this commissioner is going to really ensure we have a strong, solid program. And it's just one piece, you know, the public realm, public waste is one piece. We have agency waste. So like the schools is an important piece, but we also have commercial waste. And as we move towards the implementation of the commercial waste zones, the commercial sector will have a strong program in which they should be able to effectively source, separate, and have strong organic recycling rates. So it, you know, thinking about it from not just the household perspective, but the entire portfolio of organics.
Yeah, and that's a really important point because commercial represents 50% of the waste that's produced in New York City. And it's something I actually thank you for bringing that up. It's something I don't think we talk about enough. So commercial waste zones will be huge for making a dent on overall diversion rates in the city.
Yes. Well, just to let you know, I do plan to be at your hearing on the 15th. And I do think that the mandatory program could be beneficial. I do know that there may be some states that have that. I believe San Francisco has a mandatory program. So I like the way that what I'm hearing here this morning. As I look back though at the initial rollout of brown bin, I know in my community board district, District 12, we were not able to participate as you, council member Nurse, in the program. The option was not available. I don't recall any real advertising or information to the public on participating in a curbside organics program or why it was even important. That relationship between food scraps and its contribution to greenhouse gas emissions that pollute our environment was just not made clear. It was never clear. I think it's safe to say a lack of education and a lack of a strong marketing plan attributed to the lack of participation by the public. So moving forward on a state and city level, as waste diversion programs are rolled out, what marketing strategies will be put in place to ensure the public is well-informed, educated, resulting in optimum participation? And that's for all three of you all. So we could start with Commissioner Tisch and then go to our council member Nurse, and of course, Ingebrigt, Assembly Member Ingebrigt after. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I actually think the best marketing strategy is a simple program. Meaning, like, to me, the whole notion of having to sign up to get like a fundamental essential service or having to have a certain percentage of the district sign up, it's like, it's wacky. I don't think that makes sense. I think like all the different signups and all the complexity really contributed in a major way to the lack of participation in the program. I saw a poll this week that said that like between 50 and 60% of New Yorkers in every single borough of the city were interested in recycling their organics waste, right? So like the interest is there. I think we need to make it simple and easy. That's the first, part of marketing, is marketing something that is simple and easy to do. And the second part of marketing, like obviously any marketing strategy would have to have like all the components, right? Like social media component, huge push in community and ethnic media, which is something that Mayor Adams has been very clear with every agency that he really wants us to focus all marketing efforts on. We just had we were having a recruitment campaign for sanitation workers, and the vast majority of that marketing spend was done in community and ethnic media. But I think we really need to speak like grassroots. We need to speak to people where they are in their neighborhoods, in their communities, and that the advertising strategies of the past are not the advertising strategies of the present. And I think it's taking government too long to catch up to that. But I want you to know I get it.
Okay, great. Councilmember Nurse, can you weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, I think the administration has taken a great first step. The rollout of school organics in schools is huge and will impact so many young people who will then, teach upwards to their parents or their aunties or whoever is taking care of them in the household. Having the smart bins around the schools. Schools are such a hub for so many other things that I think that is a really great marketing strategy and a first strategy. I mean, unfortunately, climate education, environmental education has not been a factor in many of our lives. It certainly wasn't in mine. And I'm 38, so anyone older than me, I'm sure it wasn't either, unless you happen to really be passionate about it. And so, some of that stuff will take time. Social media, billboards, advertisements, getting people who are cultural influencers who will, that many people look to have, let them know this is what they're doing, is all going to be important. And I think so much groundwork has been laid, again, by the grassroots, by community groups, that as we roll this out into places, particularly like community boards like mine and in Southeast Queens, where you all maybe have been talking about this for over, a decade, 2 decades now, maybe once we make this mandatory and the rollout gets to you, it might be something that has widespread participation beyond what we anticipated because of that work. So I think it's going to be an all hands on deck thing. And for me, I always felt, when you think about the climate crisis and how are we going to ever get in front of all these things? To me, the composting, the organics was such a concrete action. It felt so clear once you understand the process that this turns into this. And so I think it's one of the best educational ways to get to zero waste because of how direct and actionable it is versus recyclables, which as the Assembly member said, the species of plastics, it's confusing. Plastics is so confusing to people, and food waste is not, if it's explained properly. So I think it's one of our clearest, fastest ways to really making a huge step towards zero waste. And I think that I know we're going to be able to count on groups like you and so many others to help spread that word and be the missionaries, or whatever we want to call it, the ambassadors for this kind of program.
Thank you. Assembly member?
So back to basics here for just a moment. We have the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act that I sponsored in the Assembly along with my colleagues. It's now law. Yeah. We are sensitive to discharges of carbon dioxide and other byproducts of combustion into the atmosphere. We live in a coastal area. Sea level rise is ongoing, and we shouldn't be encouraging it by further heating the atmosphere or the ocean. And so we have to stop burning. I just want to be clear that that's a problem. Some of you wonder why the EPR bill did not pass this year. It's because under the model put forward by the Senate and the governor, the definition of recycling included what they call chemical recycling, which is combustion of plastics.
Okay.
And that's inconsistent with the CLCPA, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. It's inconsistent with common sense. So there is a need to be really clear when we present to our public that chemical recycling is harmful. And what we really need to do instead is move toward making producers of the waste, the excessive packaging in particular, be more responsible. Right now, the entire responsibility falls upon municipal jurisdictions to take care of the waste. And so the Assembly bill would basically require producers to pay for local governments to better manage their packaging waste. And the costs, both the environmental costs and actual out-of-pocket tax costs, have to be better understood by our public. The buy-in by our public to, for example, composting and source separation and all of the other steps that they're so much an integral part of if we're going to have a coherent zero waste policy going forward. They need to also understand that there are huge costs, actual dollar costs, as well as quality of life costs if we don't get back to basics with respect to what the producers of all this waste at the manufacturing end of things are responsible for.
Assembly member, this is a perfect jump off point as we will be moving this conversation over to Mac that will be talking about legislation and what are the legislative initiatives, and EPR is front and center in that particular section, in that set of questioning that's going to happen. So I just want to say, Commissioner Tisch, Councilmember Nurse, and Assembly Member Ingebrigt, thank you so much for your time and for sharing all this good information. And Mac, I turn this over to you.
Thank you, Andrea, and hello to everybody. Thank you for tuning in to our fourth series. Hello, Commissioner Tisch and Chair Nurse and Assembly Member Ingebrigt. My name is Mac Lawrence. I am Constituent Affairs Manager with Councilwoman and Majority Whip Savina Brooke Powers. I also help manage our environmental, climate, and sanitation portfolio. So I speak with the constituents on a regular day basis. I'm a Southeast Queens native myself. So all of the issues that we're speaking of definitely have a personal but professional context to myself as well. What we like to do, especially in the office, because this is definitely a daily, weekly issue we deal with in the community. And we have very passionate and informed constituents. And as you can see throughout Southeast Queens and Queens as a whole, we are really passionate about improving our environment as best as possible. And we like to educate and be able to disseminate information to our group as much as possible so they can understand. The question I have today are, what are some legislative measures that are being considered or put into place to support zero waste and clean communities? Just for the interest of time, I will start off with Commissioner Tisch, and then we could turn it over to Assemblymember Ingebrigt and then Chair Nurse.
I think, honestly, the big disappointment of this legislative session was not passing extended producer responsibility for plastics and packaging. I think that I know the council did a lot of work to communicate their support. My office and the administration did a lot of work to communicate our support, and we were disappointed that didn't move forward at the state level. It's definitely what is needed. One thing I neglected to say at the beginning of my opening remarks, like one of the keys to achieving zero waste is producing less waste. And the packaging that some of these things come in, it's crazy. And I think if we actually are serious about zero waste to landfills, EPR, especially for packaging and plastics, has to be an important part of the equation.
Certainly. Thank you. Thank you. And Chair Nurse?
Yeah, definitely underscore the importance of an EPR package. And I know Assembly members' bottle bill is also important. The bottle bill is arguably the the best EPR we have right now.
Mm.
And hopefully that, you know, I'll let the assembly member talk about it. But at the state level, I think that bottle bill passing would also be a huge win. And besides the organics, there's some other things that we're introducing. I mean, one of the things that is a carryover from the last cycle is actually getting New York City to formalize the goal of achieving the zero waste to landfills and incinerators, or to create a justification for why not, which is really all about just putting a flag in a timeline and saying, look, we're gonna, you know, recalibrate our resources to achieve that. And I think that's an important commitment the city needs to make, given the crisis and given the exponential, the way that the crisis is exponentially intensifying. And people don't always link the, you know, waste to that, but I think it's very, very important to begin to tie that to the larger existential series of events that we are facing. So I think the city making that a real commitment and reporting on that is going to be very, very key. We've got a bunch of other little things, like, you know, making sure yellow and brown grease is put in the right place, ensuring a minimum number of drop-offs are happening in communities. Those are things that I think are really key. I know we need to still focus on capturing more e-waste and textiles. We've requested legislation around how to address the growth of lithium batteries that are being used, both by like deliveristas, and the popularity of that is going to create an issue. And we've seen some unfortunate fires that have come through that. So there, as you know, as we as New Yorkers and people start using different technologies, our waste systems have to catch up to them. And so having a strong zero waste framework, legislative framework, will help on the front end, so that as things are being developed or innovations are being incubated and thought about in terms of production and mass production, that maybe there's an ability to walk backwards from what happens to all the little pieces that are a part of something. And I fully agree, creating the environment in which certain things just cannot be produced is going to be really key to us achieving this. So I'll let the assembly member expand on some of the stuff that he's working on.
Thank you.
I'd just like to associate myself with the comments of the two preceding speakers. I was also very disappointed that we did not achieve EPR this year. And I'm also disappointed that we did not achieve at the state level a revisiting of the bottle bill. The bottle bill is the original EPR bill. It's 40 years old now. And it works, as Councilmember Nurse has indicated, it works very well. And it is important that it be expanded, because when it was originally done, it was meant to be a first step with other steps to follow that would include a greater number of types of bottles. So liquor bottles, for example, have never really been embraced within the reach of that original bill. We need to do that. And we also need to upgrade from a nickel to a dime. So that measure is important, and it is an EPR related measure. It intertwines with the concept of the larger bill. But I want you to all, if you get a chance, take a look at the comparison of the versions that were put forward. The reason the bill didn't pass is because the versions that the executive and the Senate put forward were basically much too lax to really be a reset on accomplishing our goals. Giving the industry self-regulation is something that the Assembly, I told you my story about what happened when the industry promised to recycle polystyrene, and that was a lie.
Hmm.
30 years ago. And now we have that same industry that wants to self-regulate. They say, trust us. I don't trust them. And I believe that the record of the crisis and the magnitude of the crisis that we have with plastics now is such that the irresponsibility and self-serving marketing of the industry is something that we should be aware of as we proceed toward legislation that advertises giving us new hope, when in fact it doesn't do any more than once again rely upon the industry to self-regulate. So please, if you get a chance, look at the Assembly version, look at the Senate version and the executive version, make up your own mind. But I think you'll find that the Assembly version bans toxics, that there's no ban of toxic substances in packaging in the other bills as proposed, and that there are no standards set for in the other bills for making packaging reusable, and that there are no targeted goals for reduction in units in real time that are set in the legislation that's being proposed by the Senate and the executive. And it's important to have those. So I am optimistic that we will get there, but it's going to require advocate voices such as those that have dialed into this program this morning to be fully informed and to advocate for something that's truly useful. And we're not unwilling to work toward a compromise, but we're not going to compromise at the Assembly level the basic premise that we really do need to take a fresh look at this and to not practice self-delusion.
Okay, thank you. And then definitely, you know, what I'm definitely hearing, like a common thread is how, and Chair Nurse alluded to it, and even Commissioner saying how, you know, we could take the steps with reducing, you know, beforehand, and that would be actually be able to create less waste, and how the legislative framework can also shape the human behavior. What are the ways that, you know, the public, our constituent base, how can they support these legislative efforts?
Who are you asking the question of?
I'm sorry, that's to everybody. I'll start off with the commissioner and then we'll go to the chair and then we'll end with you.
I mean, I actually think that the question is best directed at the two elected office holders who are actually in charge of the legislation. Go for it.
There you go.
Well, like I said, we're having a sanitation hearing on the 15th. I would love it if everyone here on this call came or submitted testimony. I mean, I think the more people who show up and show that there's support or interest in even hearing this and being open to giving feedback is a great sign. I think our hearing starts at noon. And again, if you can't make it, you can submit testimony up to 3 days after, and I will pass that information to the organizers of this event, who I'm sure will pass it down to you all. Would love, just really love your participation and for you to ask your folks to come out and support.
Thank you.
We operate in with certain conventions. Communication translates ultimately into opinions, and opinions translate into votes. This issue has to emerge from the lower tier of concerns to an upper tier of concerns within our electorate. They have to understand what's at stake, both in terms of human health and quality of life, and actual tax dollar costs. And so to get there from here, we have to use the conventions of, as Councilmember Nurse has indicated, of hearings. That's one of the main ways that we communicate. Advocate voices, and I think you'll have some of those a little later in the program here today, but the third-party validators of the not-for-profit organizations that don't have anything but objectivity in mind become very, very important. And so organizations such as the Environmental Advocates and Beyond Plastics and the other not-for-profit organizations that we rely upon for assisting us as electeds to communicate and to validate where the truth lies and where the straightest line toward where we are now and our goals may be, is something that is a very important consideration. So we're going to, I think, have hearings, and we're going to campaign, and we have an Environmental Bond Act that's on the ballot this year. That's an education opportunity to inform the public as to ways in which that Bond Act will accrue benefits if it is passed. And all of these education forums, if you will, hopefully over time will be guided toward the appropriate policy response.
Thank you very much. That will concludes my round of questions. I'm going to go right on to the next question with Michael Scotland.
Hi, this is Gloria. What we're going to do is, in the interest of time, we're going to move into the question and answer segment, but we probably will sneak in that fourth question down the road a piece. But we do want to give our audience members a chance to chime in because they are eagerly sending in comments, and I see a lot of comments from them around the topic of incineration. And a lot of times when we're saying, okay, no more landfills, but stuff is still being incinerated, and that's still very harmful to the environment. We need to address that. So I see a question here from Barbara Brown. I'm going to acknowledge her so she can ask a question, but we do want to get to the audience questions. Barbara?
Yes, this has been a fascinating discussion. In talking about landfills and no more landfills, I've come across the two terms. One is energy to waste, or waste to energy, I should say. And the other one is, it deals with plasma gasification. And my question is, are those one and the same, number one? To what degree is the city, and I guess the state, using either of those processes instead of landfills? And what's the downside of them? So that's the plasma gasification and the energy to waste, the waste to energy program.
So I'm sorry, this is going to have to be the only question I take because I had a hard stop 10 minutes ago. We do use, for a portion of our waste stream, we still have incineration. I am not sure, though, I'm 2 months in, which technology is used in that plant. So if I will take your contact information and have, be able to follow up with you on Monday.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming out.
Bye.
Yeah, and Assembly Member Engelbright, or either of those processes, things that you were referencing as you spoke about pollution and what's not acceptable?
Combustion is not acceptable. Both of these are variations on combustion. Waste to energy is combustion, direct burning, Plasma gasification is one of several variations on the same idea, which is to break down waste in a pressurized container, for example. But there are still byproducts that are released into the atmosphere or that have to be captured at great expense. And so they're not something like plasma gasification is an expensive proposition, and one that comes with atmospheric release hazards as well. I just want to point out one of the problems with waste to energy. That is a fancy way to dress up the basic combustion, basic burning. That's what that is. It makes it sound like it's a romantic concept somehow.
Exactly.
We're going to transfer waste into something positive that is beneficial to us all. The way to do that is to stop producing the waste in the first instance and to avoid combustion, because what we're doing to the composition of our atmosphere is really harmful at a global scale. So yeah, no, I wish that those terms, as enticing as they sound, would lead to something wonderful, but they don't. Let me just point out one of the problems with waste to energy or basic burning is that it rains. And the waste comes in wet, and you can't burn water. But the waste keeps coming, so your furnace basically doesn't have complete combustion, because the next load of waste, wet from the rain from last night, arrives. And the incomplete combustion is a additional dimension to this. That is a real problem. It's a chemical problem, and it's a waste into the atmosphere problem. It's a dioxin problem with any of the halogen-based plastics.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? If you have a question, please raise your hands. I see a lot in the chat, and I would really appreciate it if you have a question, raise your hands. Let's see if I can take a look at to see if there are any other raised hands. Anybody have a concern? Okay, here we go.
Yep, 3 hands up at the top.
I see
Otica.
Mary Arnold. Mary Arnold, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you so much, first of all, for doing this. You're both heroes for what you're doing. I have a question about burning. I know at the Newtown Creek sewage treatment plant, they're burning, I believe, organics. And there was just a new burner that opened up, or is going to open up, out in Brookhaven, which is going to be burning New York City organics, Great Gardens. And I just wondered, we talked a lot about plastic burning, but what about organics burning?
Burning is burning.
It's terrible. Yeah.
You can put some things into the combustion process that make it worse than just the byproduct of carbon dioxide. But carbon dioxide is the primary result of burning organics. We call burning fossil organics burning coal. Just to place it in perspective, it's not a new idea, burning organics. Coal is ancient freshwater wetlands, carbon concentrated and compressed. So if we take uncompressed modern carbon concentration and incinerate it, you have the same result. And it's really harmful to the composition of our atmosphere, and it's causing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is acidifying the global ocean and overheating the ocean. Just the heating of the ocean alone is flooding our coasts, because water expands when it on a global scale. When it expands, it floods coastlines. It also melts glaciers and has other very serious environmental consequences. So no, it's not a good idea. And it's, yes, that's what it is. It's burning.
Okay, next person who has a question is Kareem Otakon.
Hi, my name is Karim. I'm from the Brookhaven Landfill Action and Remediation Group out in Long Island. So what does the Long Island-based group have to do with this Eastern Queens Alliance? Well, our waste crisis is New York City's waste crisis. As Assemblyman Engelbrecht spoke about, our landfills are closing, slated to close in 2024. This is over 2 million people's garbage. And my question is, where is New York State DEC in this regional waste planning? Assemblyman Engelbrecht spoke of Marlboro 4000 debacle, but 35 years later, we have no public regional solid waste planning for 3 million people in Nassau and Suffolk. All waste planning is up to these little towns that don't have the capacity, and they're conflicted in actually doing their waste planning. In 2020, DC tried to create Long Island Solid Waste Leadership Council and have it housed within the Long Island Regional Planning Council, which is a project, a quasi-public entity of Nassau and Suffolk counties. Then in April 2021, LIRPC quietly retracted from regional waste planning. And in its response, one of our waste haulers is creating New York State's largest waste transfer station to ship our waste through NYC to either upstate or out of state landfills. And just this process, and I should also note that the vice chair of the quasi-public entity that was in charge of regional waste planning is an employee of the waste haulers. So on the one hand, they are torpedoing public regional waste planning efforts. On the other hand, they're creating false solutions for us and actually harming any potential for zero waste on a regional level. So I just, this is why we have a state government, to protect us from local governments like this, but the state has sat out of this.
Well, the state is a complex bureaucracy. I can say this part of the state, the assembly, is not sitting out. We are attempting very diligently to work toward a solution. I should point out that we provided a grant to the two towns that still have landfills to give them some additional resources to work with. So, just my plea to you is to clarify what part of the state is bureaucracy is acting in your interest and which may not be. The local jurisdictions, again, the waste comes in every day. Every day. It just keeps coming. And so relying, as you correctly point out, relying upon local governments to fix this is really not in the right direction. We do need the state to embrace policy that will lead to some meaningful solutions. What we have to be aware of is the influence of the special interests, most particularly in the packaging industry. And everything else that you said, though, is absolutely spot on. And New York City will see, unless we can move toward a zero waste type of program, New York City will see, in all likelihood, the transfer of waste out to Ohio from Brookhaven and Babylon and Huntington, other parts of Nassau and Suffolk counties. So I just want to say your overall level of concern is spot on.
Next hand up is Assembly Member Anderson, and then Natalie Vina.
Yeah, thank you so much, Barbara. from Eastern Queens Alliance, and to all of the partners who are on the call, my colleagues in government, Assemblymember Stephen Engelbright and Councilwoman Sandy Nurse for coming on the call this morning. I just wanted to bring some brief remarks and thank you guys for, thank you and welcome you to Southeast Queens to have this real substantive conversation about waste and how waste impacts our community. It's not just the issue of quality of life. It's not just the issue of environment, but it's also the specific issue of how fumes and how toxins are impacted or expanded, rather, if you will, due to waste practices, that are less than savory, to say the least. And so we know that as a state, we have a lot of work to do. And I know that Steve is absolutely the expert on the subject matter. But one of the things I want to do today is challenge us all to become experts on the subject matter, because it's something that impacts us daily, whether we see it or have been able to calculate it or not. And being an expert locally means just doing our part and pitching in to ensure that not only we have a cleaner and healthier environment, but we're doing what we can on the local level as citizens and as residents to help peel back and fight back against climate change and global warming, which is increasing all across our neighborhoods. Lastly, I want to mention that our communities here in Southeast Queens are more likely to be subject to environmental negatives, whether it's power plants, whether it's waste transfer stations, things of that nature. And so I believe someone asked how we can continue to get folks more involved on the subject matter legislatively. From January to June, we are in legislative session on the state assembly and state senate side. So we absolutely want to hear from our community, from our constituents, what climate related or environmental justice related pieces of legislation or ideas that may not haven't even been legislated yet that we should focus on in the legislative session. We have to make sure that we continue towards our goals of zero carbon, that we continue towards our goals for a cleaner and healthy and safer environment, but it's definitely going to take a model of co-governance and making sure that our community participates as well. So thank you again to my colleagues and to the organizers of today's event. I'm just so excited that the leaders from the Assembly District that I'm proud to represent are leading this conversation, not just with the amazing folks here who are on the call that are experts, but they're also leading the charge on the ground and making sure that our community prioritizes this issue. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Natalie?
This has been such a great event. I have learned so much. Thank you so much, EQA, for organizing. I have a very quick question. I know Commissioner Tisch left, but I think Stephen Caruso is here and maybe other people from DSNY, but I teach at Queens College, and I know one of my colleagues at CUNY Law, Rebecca Bratsby, also seconds this. We would like smart bins at CUNY campuses. We want them at York. We want them at Queens College. We want them at CUNY Law. We want them at Queensborough. We want them at LaGuardia, and really Brooklyn, all the campuses. So I would like to know who to talk to at DSNY about getting the smart bins.
Hi, Natalie.
Hi.
Good morning. I'll message you with my email address, and I will put you in contact with our Bureau of Recycling Sustainability. They've been the bureau that's been spearheading the project and setting the bins out. So I'll connect you with the right folks.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Okay, so the last three questions, I guess, Gloria, we have Judith Enck, then Joyce Bialik, and Maggie Clark.
Yes,
So
we
Judith?
want to, if we can be succinct, because we want to get to our next panel. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I just want to quickly publicly thank Assemblymember Engelbright for standing firm and not going along with such a weak extended producer responsibility bill in the Senate and the Assembly. it was not easy. His bill is serious about waste reduction, and that's how we're going to get out of the solid waste crisis. So a new legislative session starts in January. It would be good to have the city of New York supporting a strong EPR bill, one that actually gets the work done. So I'm the former EPA regional administrator during the Obama administration and now head up a little group called Beyond Plastics. And we'd love to work with the city, with grassroots organizations to pass strong EPR. Quick word on plastics recycling, because I spend all my time working on plastics because it's such a major environmental justice and health and climate change issue. The plastics industry is finally admitting that plastics recycling doesn't work. It's only achieved a 5 to 6% recycling rate. And as we heard this morning, the pivot from plastic producers is toward something called chemical recycling or advanced recycling, which is actually gasification, pyrolysis, different types of burning. Unfortunately, Assemblywoman Hindman of Queens has introduced Assembly Bill 9495, which promotes chemical recycling. So I think that's an important dialogue to have. This is a struggle happening across the country. The American Chemistry Council is really interested in not reducing plastic because chemicals and fossil fuels are used to make plastics. So we've got to get chemical recycling off the table and continue to push for things like the Englebright EPR bill, which would require reductions in packaging by 50%. And of course, the Bigger, Better Bottle bill, also introduced by Assemblymember Englebright and Senator Rachel May. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's an interesting piece of information that we'll look into further. Thank you so much. Is there one other person with a hand up?
Yeah, there are two, Joyce Bialik and Maggie Clark.
Thank you. Joyce?
Are you there, Joyce? You have to unmute.
Joyce.
Maybe Joyce left.
Okay.
Yes.
Maggie Clark.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, here I am, and thank you.
Joyce.
So I want to ditto what Judith Enck just mentioned about the wonderful Assembly Member EPR bill, Senator Englebright. And as the Assembly Member mentioned, it's taking away control of decisions about packaging from the packaging industry, but giving them to the government, namely DEC. And so as a result, DEC has a tremendous amount of work on its plate now to regulate packaging, see that all the measures in the bill are carried out, and requires a lot of resources to do this. So I wonder if Assemblymember Englebright could tell us what we can do to assist the DEC to be able to carry out its additional responsibilities under his bill, which of course we hope will be passed.
The DEC is an agency that has a commissioner who serves at the pleasure of the governor. So it's in the administrative side of government that the DEC has to feel that it's a part of a program that is in concert with the goals that you hear from organizations such as Beyond Plastic and advocates such as Judith Enck. They should be working in tandem, and the way to get that message through to the DEC is to speak to the executive chamber, the governor. We have a new governor. I have endorsed her because I really think she's trying to do the right thing. I mentioned that parenthetically. I'm not campaigning here today, but I believe that she knows how to listen. And if the articulate voices that are part of this Zoom message format this morning reach out to the executive chamber with a coherent and in concert plea to move toward an EPR bill that is modeled on a program structure that empowers the DEC to do the right thing. I think it will happen. It's not the only way to do it, but the DEC was set up in the 1970s in order to accomplish things just like this. And so as an organ of government, it is the organ that we should be trying to empower and to make it feel as self-conscious as possible through the process. Yes, but also to give it the resources, give that agency additional personnel, give that agency an additional sense that they are not working on a mission that nobody cares about. We have to bring to the governor a sense of urgency that I sense in this conversation this morning. That has to be translated to the executive of the state, because that's who the DEC works for.
Thank you. May we hear from Maggie Clark?
Hi there. I'm Maggie Clark, PhD. I've been with the Manhattan Swab since 1988, since the year it formed. And I saw Local Law 19 of 1989 go through with its, at that time, they were great goals, right? 25% in the next 5 years of diversion rate, of course. But now we need to be having a zero waste bill or a law so that we're going beyond the 25%. We look at the other model communities, and I wonder why it is, my question, why it is that the sanitation department ignored its successful pilots that it did from 1988 to 1992, went all over the city with all different combinations of recyclables, testing how to optimize participation and how to optimize the collection routes, and instead opted for this opt-in thing, and not convenient. And we know that you not only need to make people aware and comprehend your program, but you need to motivate, change attitudes, get people to participate and make them happy to do that. We've, as a Manhattan Swab, we put together a zero waste bill, which I just put in the chat, and hope that it can be considered by the city and the state for pushing to zero waste now beyond the 25% or 20% that we've achieved again. So again, the question was, can we get to zero waste? Can we do what we said?
Yeah, the commissioner is gone. However, Stephen Caruso is here. I don't know if you can address that at all, or if either of the other panelists want to also address that. I see a screen here. Okay, so, okay. If either of you want to address that, and then we will move on. Is Stephen Caruso here?
I think he's on still, yeah.
I'm still on. I will make a brief statement on that.
Okay, thank you.
So I can't speak too much on it just because I wasn't on the job back in the late 80s and early 90s. I can certainly look into it, but I do agree that the having to opt in is probably not the most efficient or convenient way for folks to get involved in a program. And I believe that the commissioner did mention a little bit earlier that we were going to rethink the way that we implement these programs. And again, just to make it more convenient for folks. But I do agree that education certainly is key. outreach. We have to make sure that folks know that the program is available, and we have to make sure that they know that if they want it, to make sure that their voices are heard.
Thank you, Stephen.
I just want to add that I think, I do think we will pass a universal curbside, and I do think we will start to work towards zero waste. But I think that as it relates to both state bills and city bills, I think it's really important moving forward around the question of can we get to it. I think we definitely have to stay vigilant, but I think beyond just legislation, we have to ensure that our state and city municipalities put the money behind anything that gets passed, because we cannot pass legislation for such ambitious programs and, quite frankly, half-heartedly put the resources behind it. We want the success of these programs to exist. It is essential that the success of these programs happen, and therefore the resources need to happen. So when we think about what folks are doing over the summer and over the fall, it should not be a dormant period for the advocacy. You should be reaching out to your representatives, and advocacy groups should be looking at the question of what will it cost us? What is it going to cost us to really focus on achieving these goals? And where is that money going to come from, whether it be both our public resources and private sector resources? But we shouldn't see off periods of legislative and budgetary sessions as relaxing moments. We should be seeing this as opportunities to really dive into asking the questions about how much will it cost, and are our elected leaders committed to fully funding them and making it a priority. This current city budget did really well on I think everyone's going to be very happy with sanitation things, or some staff lines, and I wish we could have fought harder for, but overall the investments in environmental and climate justice, this wasn't the strongest budget on that. And so I think over the next 12 months, as we go through the next 12 months of getting to a new budget cycle, I think we really need to focus on ensuring that this city puts those investments up front, because these are costly systems. This is not cheap. And to make it work well, it can't be cheap. And so just wanted to plug for that advocacy during the summer and during the fall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. I think that's a very smart, that's good advice for us all, that there's no time to rest. Now that we've gotten some information and some direction, we need to be active and making sure that we're making our voices heard in Albany and New York City, at the city council level, and being active in our communities. I want to thank you so very much for taking time out this morning to come and meet with us. Council Member Sandy Nurse, Assembly Member Steve Englebright, and the Commissioner of the New York City Department of Sanitation Commissioner Jessica Tisch, and thank you, Steve Caruso, as well. This has been very informative. As you can see, there are a lot of questions that have come out of this morning's discussion. We would look through them and collate them in a way, and I would imagine you would like for us to share them with you. Yeah. And so we look forward to doing that in the coming days. Thank you so much. You're welcome to stay and hear. At this time, we're going to ask if there are any other of the co-sponsors in the room who want to say a word or two, like a minute. I know we've heard from one of our co-sponsors already, Assembly Member Khalil Anderson. Is there anyone else in the room who just wants to say hello and share a brief word on the topic? Just speak up if you're here. Okay. I think that's that. So then what I'd like to do at this point is move on to the second panel. And this is a panel of community activists. These are people who have, they're passionate, they're knowledgeable, and they are very active in our communities with helping to be on the ground at the grassroots level to clean up our communities, to beautify our communities, and to roll out sustainability and food justice and zero waste initiatives. So at this point, I'd like to introduce our panelists, Faye Hill, District Leader from Assembly District 31B. She's also a volunteer for Springfield Park, where she serves as Executive Director and Secretary. Eric Arnhem. He is a member of the Forest Hills Green Team. And Diana Rose, she's the Executive Director of Sovereign Markets, and also she's the creator of Her Sustainable Life. And for all of these panelists, you can find their biographies in the biographical statements in the program that we'll put out in the chat once again for you to take a look at. So I'm going to turn the floor over to our two moderators for this section. Barbara Brown, who is the chair of the Eastern Queens Alliance, and Charles Davis, who is from the Rosedale Civic Association, and that is one of the member organizations for the Eastern Queens Alliance. So welcome to the panelists. Thank you to the moderators, and I turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And we are delighted to serve on this part of the program. You know, as chair of the Eastern Queens Alliance, I was so happy to hear Assembly Member Engelbright talk about the origins of, geographically and geologically, what has been the origins of Queens. And when he talked about the landfills in Southeast Queens and out in the Jamaica Bay area, because, you know, early on, we were naive enough to think that Idlewild Park Preserve, which it turns out to have been part of it, was a landfill area for waste, construction waste. We were naive enough to think, well, we could return it to its pristine condition. And obviously that's not going to happen. But we've done a lot in terms of, we've collected all kinds of trash out there. And for those of you online who don't know, JFK Airport, which a lot of people treasure, is built on 5,000 square acres of filled-in wetlands. So all that landfill stuff, all that gunk is what JFK Airport is sitting on. So we're going to turn to our panelists, because, you know, a lot of people think that there are a lot of crazy people out there running around doing things in the neighborhood to help to get to zero waste and to help to beautify and all of that. And I guess maybe they're right a little bit. Maybe so, and I put myself in that category. But we're delighted to have Faye Hill, who is from Volunteers of Springfield Park and actually the president of that organization, and Eric Arnhem, who is with the Forest Hills Green Team, and Diana Rose, who is with Sovereign Markets and Her Sustainable Life. So the first question that we're going to ask you, and I'm going to put my questions, two questions in one. What motivated you to start your organizations, and what's your mission and major goals for the organizations? So motivation to start and mission and goals. And we can start with, I'll just go alphabetically. So we're going to go with Eric Arnhem.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you to the Eastern Queens Alliance for the invitation to speak with you this morning. The Forest Hills Green Team, obviously we're in Forest Hills, so we're aptly named, but it's a peculiar mixture of gardening and politics. And let me explain that a little bit. For gardening, in terms of gardening, we work with two of the local high schools, Forest Hills High School, which is just over there, a block away, and also Mel's, which is down on Metropolitan Avenue. We work with them on their community gardens, which they have out back. We work with local community members on the railroad trestle under Yellowstone Boulevard to beautify that and put some trees and bushes and plants over there. And we also work with local groups on compost drop-off sites. We started when the pandemic began. The usual Grow New York compost drop-off site at McDonald Park was discontinued. It used to happen at the farmers market every year or every Sunday. We stepped in and we began to operate that ourselves in conjunction with the Queens Botanical Gardens. And then earlier this year, Grow New York came back, so we yielded that back to them in McDonald Park. But we started a second drop-off site in Common Point, Queens, which is just across the street over there, 108th Street. And then in terms of politics, we work with local candidates on their campaigns. We are not a tax-deductible organization, so we are free to endorse candidates, work on their campaigns, and publicize that fact. And then after they hopefully get elected, we work with them on legislation. So as I said, we're a fairly peculiar mix of gardening and politics. Check.
Barbara, you're on mute.
And thank you, Eric. Yes, so Fay Hill, how did volunteers for Springfield Park start? And what are some of your goals and objectives?
Good afternoon, good morning still. Thank you, Eastern Queens Alliance, for inviting me, because this is a very big topic. We discussed about the waste and all of that, but it was very interesting to hear what some of the elected officials are striving to do. Well, I've been in Springfield Gardens for over 45 years. I remember when Springfield Park, it's where we really focus our attention to. It was a park that no one went to. It was full of debris, drug trafficking, drug shooting, and as a matter of fact, where we are now on Springfield Boulevard, there was no entrance going south to 147th Avenue. So a group of us, including Veronica Bilan, decided to restore the park. And we have been doing it since 2015. We are a non-profit organization, and we have been getting grants from our local officials, discretionary funds. But it's such a gruesome thing to get the money and to spend it is unbelievable. But anyway, we still strive to do the best we can. And now the park has been restored. We see a lot of people enjoying the park, and there were parks that were available, and everybody is heading to Springfield Park to use the park because of its beautification and its restoration. We now have a senior health group that our assemblyman, well, it started with our assemblywoman, Michelle Titus. She used to have the seniors come out and do some exercise for maybe a week or maybe a day. But our new assemblyman, Khalil Anderson, put some funds, and also our councilwoman, Safina Brooks Powell, put in some funds where the seniors come out and do exercise, and we have a nutritionist. And we are planning on, with COVID, COVID-19, we were able to do a lot of activities where we reach out to our community and give them, have activities for the kids. We have, we also have activities where we, have hot dogs and hamburgers, and we have fun for the kids, and everybody seemed to enjoy our park, and it's a big achievement for us. But if we could get some more support from our parks department as far as cleaning up, because we have a lot of people who use the park, especially during COVID-19, and we didn't have garbage cans. And when we found out that the garbage cans are still on the ships, I don't know when they're going to dock those ships to unload those garbage cans. I think we only have 4 garbage cans and we have 21 acres of land, and people use the park. People have come there to even have their church service. So it's a big achievement for us, and we're glad the park is now open to the general public. But on the state level, we applied for a grant since 2015, and we just got the money 2 weeks ago. So sometimes it's gruesome and very frustrating not to go forward, but we still go forward, and we have a beautiful park, and we plan to do more to the park that people can enjoy in the environment and open space. I hope I didn't speak too much. Thank you.
Thank you, Faith. And so we are going to turn to Ms. Diana Rose and ask her the same 2 questions. What inspired you to organize your organization or to start your organization? And what are your goals and objectives?
Awesome. Thank you so much, EQA, for having me. Ms. Brown, Ms. Charles, thank you so much for the work that you do in this community. It is really inspiring. So we started, to be honest, I was born and raised in Southeast Queens, particularly, I would say Jamaica, Queens, born and raised, and, just went to school here, grew up here, and I started my degree, my pre-med education at Hofstra University, and then I took a course in chronic and communicable diseases at Hofstra, and just realized the comparisons that I saw in that class to my community and where I was living, and instantly changed and declared my major for community health with a minor in sustainability. And that was, I won't tell you how long that was, so I won't age myself, but been doing this for about over, I would say 12 years, been in this space of community health and sustainability. And my first project was Beautiful Butterfly, which was a local project that we started at Springfield Gardens High School, and just getting some of our young women in the community involved. And Springfield Park was our first beautification project. That was when our now BP was council member. And, so that's where the love of community engagement and community revitalization started. Fast forward over 12 years as the executive director of CHACORP, the Community Health and Economic Corporation. We've launched farmers markets, commercial kitchens. We work very closely. We have a partnership with the Sanitation Foundation, and have, had numerous amount of cleanups in partnerships also with our elected officials. So I would say what my work that I do is really my lifestyle. And I am a zero waste caterer by profession. I have a for-profit called Jars of Delight, and we are a zero waste caterer, and we cater large corporate events. So zero waste, the idea of zero waste sustainability is really involved in every aspect of my life. And recently we were blessed to host a show in partnership with the Sanitation Foundation called A Voice for Zero Waste. And that show was created specifically for what I keep hearing, right? How do we get the community involved? And that show was specifically created to look at zero waste from a different lens, not just from an aspect of the environment, but also not wasting your time, not wasting your energy, not wasting your talents for the betterment of your community. So that's why we exist. And that's why I do the work that I do. That's how I got started. And I hope with your help and all of us working together, we can continue.
Thank you so much. So now I heard a thread running through the 3 statements. Eric Arnhem started by talking about how they're combining, I guess, their advocacy for the natural spaces and with and cleanup and composting and all of that with politics. And you didn't each say politics, but I think all of us know that interacting with that political system is a part of what we have to do. And on the Eastern Queens Alliance level, we call it advocacy and stewardship and community engagement and all of those good things where we need to get people involved in what's going on, and we need to advocate and make sure that those who represent us in high places are representing truly what the community needs are. So, Eastern Queens Alliance has been working on its advocacy strand through the years, and that's how we, after 20 years, finally have our Idlewild Environmental Center. Took us 20 years of advocacy to get that center there. But it's so my question to you is, what are some of the challenges, and what are some of your accomplishments? So we can start with Eric. We can go around alphabetically again.
Well, first and foremost, the challenge that we face is deciding on what will we advocate for. And what I mean by that is that there are at least 3 different kinds of folks who are in this movement. There are people who are for nature and conservancy, looking for clean land, clean water, clean air, cleaning up the beaches and parks, cleaning the streets. And then there are folks who are looking at the natural environment, trying to eliminate species extinctions. The butterflies is a great example of that. There are others who are looking to wipe out the rats that are eating the garbage. Then I would say that the corner of the environmental movement that I occupy is looking to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to reverse global warming. So we look at things a little bit differently in that corner. The tragedy to us is when the plastic bottle is made, because that involves the use of fossil fuels. And the other tragedy is when it's burned, because that releases greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. There are others who are looking to, clean plastic off of the beaches and out of the parks and things like that. And there, of course, the recycling movement to reuse it. But what I would say is that in general, the question we face is, tactics. What do we do? In the case of composting, I mentioned before that, because of the pandemic, some composting was canceled. And also because of politics, some compost sites were evicted or threatened with eviction. So in December 2020, we joined with Big Reuse to have a big protest in Queensbridge Park, right by the Queensboro Bridge, because they were getting evicted. Their compost site was getting closed by the city. There were other protests on the East River in Manhattan. And then in March of this year, we had a rally at Borough Hall with, it was chaired by Councilmember Sandy Nurse, where we were advocating composting. And the great thing about that is that we had a counter protest from some people dressed up as rats. One of them, in fact, was holding a pizza slice. So that was the pizza rat. We were saying, no, we don't want composting. We want more rats. And then in April of this year, we actually went around measuring leaks in refrigerators, commercial refrigerators in supermarkets, which is something that leads to food spoilage. And that food spoilage becomes landfill, and that landfill becomes methane, and that methane becomes a greenhouse gas. So, I mean, the cycle goes round. So I would say that in general, our struggle is to define the sector that we want to be active in, and then define the tactics that we want to bring that to the front. Check.
I echo on yours too, Eric, because even with the compost, I think the commissioner mentioned earlier on the first panel about educating our community, because right now I still use my brown container for recycling, And we have a recycling garden down the block from me. But there's not enough of that, for to have the compost done in the communities. And a lot of people, a lot of our neighbors, I spoke to a neighbor the other day. Oh, you're still using that brown garbage thing? I put mine in a corner. So I think education, we have to educate our people to know what's going on. And we could start from in the schools also, the kids, because kids would tell their parents, oh, mommy or daddy, don't put that in, it's not supposed to go in that container. This way we can separate what's supposed to be recycled or what's not supposed to be recycled. So the education is a plus. And as far, because I focus more on the park itself. People come to the park and use the park, and they litter and they leave it there. We don't have containers. So we need our elected officials to be more engrossed in what we advocates or grassroots people are doing, to know that we are here. And it starts from the grassroots, because we are the grassroots people who vote them into office. So, so it's can be a little bit frustrating also to know that, they're not aware of what's going on, or they don't care. I really don't know. But I think that's a big concept we have to look into with these elected officials. They have to know what's going on, and people have to voice their opinion. And, as far as that rally, I wish I knew about it too, because I'd be out there also advocating for clean air and compost. Thank you.
You're on mute, Barbara.
Oh, Diana, thank you, Faye.
I know it's still some working around this mute and unmute thing. I think what are the biggest challenges that we're facing right now, specifically from my organizational viewpoint, would be funding. So for example, the video that I will put in the chat, and I hope that you all get to watch, was a beautifully curated video we had Felix from our local Laurelton Block Association. We had our Assemblywoman Alicia Hyman. We had the CEO of Gotham Greens in the video, right? So what the idea was for the series is to highlight different people, as Eric was saying, in different sectors of this whole framework of what sustainability is and zero waste can be. Just everyone has their own role. So we highlighted different ones in the community. And I think the biggest challenge is funding, right? It cost me personally $18,000 to create that series out of my own funds, right? Which I don't have a problem to do, because that is what you do when you believe in the work. You put not just your mouth, not just your time, but also your money. But it also has to be sustainable for myself, right? So this is a project that I feel like will bring people in the community who don't necessarily understand the zero waste, sustainability, environmental lingo, and that may feel a little intimidated by these laws and these rallies, right? Some people don't connect on that way, but I thought the series was a way to show people, well, maybe you think wasted money is a thing, and let's show you how when you waste your money, how that ties into the whole context of zero waste for the environment, right? Why don't you reduce, reuse, right? You can save money that way. Maybe that's a way to bring people in. Well, you don't like to waste your time, right? Who wants to waste time? And maybe that is a way to bring people into the larger conversation of zero waste and environmentalism. So I think funding is a big thing. If the mayor's office, if the Department of Sanitation, if all of these entities want to get grassroots organizations involved, which the community is closely tied to, that's one of the ways you do it. You pay grassroots organizations to, exemplify or create the content that you need. We're already doing it. So if you paid us to do it, it'll be much more easy and much more sustainable for all of us. So I think that is the biggest challenge that we face, is funding. And then the second challenge that we face is being more inclusive in the conversation, and just understanding that, well, we might not understand the science behind it, or some of, our constituents and our group members may not understand the science, but it doesn't mean that they don't have a place in the conversation. So I think those are the two things that I see can be easily fixed. So money and inclusion.
Thank you. And that leads us into the last couple of questions about in terms of volunteerism and how to stimulate more people to volunteer, or get more people to volunteer and get them engaged. And I'm going to turn this over to Charles Davis, who's going to take this panel out.
All right. Well, listen, I appreciate you guys are here, and I see you guys doing the work in the community. So I was going to get right to the question about the volunteers and engagement. What methods would you guys use to get more volunteers? And you touched on some of it, but are there any other methods that you use to get people to volunteer or become engaged in the community about the zero waste? We're going to reverse this and go with Diane, Faith, then Eric.
Yeah, what are we doing? I think we're continuing what we have been doing, right? Creating spaces for people to do the work. So whether that's a cleanup opportunity, or whether that's just a conversation. I've held a ton of zero waste or sustainability, just conversations. And it's not anything major. It's just like, hey, we have some food. Come on, let's talk about zero waste and what our community looks like. It doesn't have to be a formal setting, right? It's just inviting people into your own personal space. My house, they've come to my house, the commercial kitchen that we're running, the farmer's market that we run. So it's just anywhere that you can get a conversation going and add food, because we love food. I think that's a great way to get people involved and think about next steps. Another way to get involved is when we do have amazing forums like what EQA has put together today, is inviting our networks to say, hey, come listen to a panel discussion that I'm a part of, right? Again, it has to do a lot with connection, and people are going to participate in what they feel closely connected to. So I think, again, by increasing the inclusion of saying, okay, you're a grassroots organization, you're someone in the community doing the work, let's invite you to the table. That brings my network to the table, and that brings my network to the table. And I think that's how we do it.
Yeah, what we do really, we try to get the kids involved in cleaning up and let them realize that the environment is for them when we are gone, the generation that's coming. But I didn't touch on the frustration, but the kids in our community, I don't know if they're not aware of how important our environment is, or they're not taught science in school or whatever. But we have our park cleanup at least 3 times per year. Each year where we plant bulbs and we clean up the park and so forth. And I can't get these kids to come out. But when we have a picnic or an outreach activity, I see all the kids that are living in the neighborhood come out. So I guess the food can bring our volunteerism come about. And also what we try to do is to reach out to the parent liaison, to tell these kids can get community service for hours, although most of the kids want to have money or in their hands, when they finish a job. But I don't know that's is going to be the right thing, because I've seen where kids who have gone off to college, who have done community work, and I'm talking from experience where one of my sons did community work, and he got a full scholarship for both college and for his master's degree. But we have to encourage our kids. Although we had a group that came from Springfield High School, one of the magnet school over there at Springfield. And the first thing they said, do we have food for us? So I don't know if food is going to bring these people here to do their volunteerism, because we are all our board members are seniors, and we need the young people to step up to the plate. So that's a big challenge as far as volunteerism is concerned.
So when we operate these compost drop-off sites at Common Point, Queens tomorrow, and in the past in McDonald Park at the farmers market. We use them as a point of contact. Normally we have a minimum of 1 or 2 people at the drop-off site, but frequently we have 8 or 10 people there. Because one of the things we do is when you come to drop off your food scraps, we talk to you. We tell you why we're here, and we thank you for coming and dropping off your food scraps. We tell you what we're doing. We tell you about the gardening that we're doing, helping with the street trees and the Department of Parks, helping with the gardening at the railroad trestle, and we tell you about our monthly meetings. We also invite local politicians to come and do the same, talk to their constituents. During the petitioning period in February and March, we actually had petitions on the table. As I mentioned earlier, we're a peculiar mix of gardening and politics, and we do not, we're not tax deductible, so we do not have any prohibitions on working with local politicians and candidates. We have petitions on the table. We have letters to various government officials. We'll advocate right then and there. There's no shyness about getting involved in politics. And then when we work with the local high schools in their gardens, we also finagle invitations to address their classes. And there, the secret weapon that we have is we have a guy, he's actually a 10th grader from Manhattan. He runs a nonprofit called Kids Fight Climate Change. And we bring him into the schools with us, the Forest Hills Green Team, and we give presentations on, what is global warming, what can you do about it, and most importantly, how can you plug into the movement now in terms of advocacy, in terms of activism, protesting, letter writing, gardening, compost collection, what have you. There's a flavor for everybody out there. Check.
Okay, so I see everybody has different methods, but volunteers are important. And I like the way you guys go back to the schools to try to get some of these young folks involved. So when they get my age, they're more like, how do you say, it becomes a habit with them. Like my granddaughter, she's 6, we show her how to separate, the foods in the house. This goes in this bin, this goes in that bin, with the compost and everything. So I think if we start now, it's going to work, but it's a job. I know that volunteer is a job to get people to come out and, and help out, but everybody can do something though. So the next question I want to ask you is, have you seen any physical or attitude changes in the community that might attribute to what you guys do out there? Again, we go Diane, Faith, and Eric.
Yeah, so there has been, I would say, some changes. I think people who are less vocal about, for example, when you're looking at dumping, right, illegal dumping, I think more now than before, community members are speaking up and not just letting it happen. A lot of times I'll get emails and I'll just get text messages like, oh, there's garbage on 225th under the trestle, right? And I laugh because I'm like, wow, I am not the gatekeeper of the garbage of the community, but it's great to get those kind of messages, right? And we forward it to whoever needs to get the message. But I think advocacy, I'm starting to see more advocacy in our community, whereas people would just kind of just say, hey, that's not my problem. I'm also seeing an increase in interest in composting, right? When the brown bins first came out, I just went and spoke to my neighbors and asked them if they understood what it meant. And a lot of people were like, no, we just got these bins. They got a pamphlet. They didn't really understand. So I'm starting to see more of, at the time, I was starting to see more of my neighbors take a more active role in composting. So there are some changes, right? Some positive changes, but I guess because we're in such a dire situation when it comes to the environment, the changes are not happening fast enough and the growth is not happening fast enough. But I think we need to take time to realize that people are being more aware and they're starting to increase their level of advocacy around zero waste and sustainability and community health. So those are the two things that I see. And also, if I don't put on a program, if I don't have an event, I do get phone calls and emails like, hey, when's your next zero waste event or cleanup, or what's happening in the community that I can get involved in. So I think there are some positive changes. We just gotta, be steadfast in what we're doing and not get discouraged.
Yeah, I see some minor changes around the area, not much, because the kids, I hate to blame the kids, but I guess training comes from the home where they still throw garbage around, and people say to me, Faye, what can we do about this? But what I see, some of the folks who walk their dog, and that is a big major problem with when they walk their dog in the park. We put bags out there for them to pick up for the plastic bags, or disposable plastic bags. And I've seen a couple of people who entertain the disposal of the bags and so forth. And I saw a guy once when his dog did his thing, he dug it up and covered it. I don't know if that's a good thing, but anyway, I see a very few changes, not much. And we need, we have a lot to do, and it's not moving fast enough. And hopefully, if we can tell our kids from in the school, teach them in the school, and they will be more forceful when you teach these kids, because they're like sponge. They gather all information and they spew it out to the elders and their parents, and there'll be some changes, but it's as the start in the school, and the kids go back home and they can tell their parents about what's going on in the community to save our environment.
So 3 areas I want to mention. One is going back to that railroad trestle at Yellowstone Boulevard. There's a lot of foot traffic through there. And the folks that are walking through the neighborhood, they're seeing the plants going in, they're seeing the garbage come out. They're seeing it become, rather than being an area of blight, now it is a, pleasant area. It's pleasant to walk through there. There's better lighting, there's plants on both sides. We're even putting some of the sanitation department's composting to work there to help fertilize the plants. And one thing I'll mention is that we found this out after we started, that the local assembly member here in Forest Hills actually has to walk under that railroad trestle to get to his office. Yeah. So he's noticed the difference and actually has come up with some grant money to help finance, more plants, more tools, more, gardening utensils and things like that. So that's number one. Number two, in the neighborhood, we're cleaning out the rain gardens, and we're also using some of that sanitation department composting around the street trees, all around the neighborhood to beautify those a little bit. And then the third thing is that, we're getting to meet our neighbors at these compost drop-off sites. We strategically decided to sort of like a ghost light during the pandemic. We kept composting going at the farmers market in McDonald Park because we thought it was too crucial to let it go by the wayside. And we kept it going, and we turned it into a sort of community meeting point where people will come, they'll drop off their food scraps, and then they'll hang around to chat and sign our petitions and, talk about politics and, whatnot. So those 3 things, I think we've made a minor but positive improvement in our communities. Check.
Okay, I see. Yeah, I like the ideas that you guys walk around to get people engaged and to change the hearts and minds of people in the community. Because I remember when we first started, we just recycling. The bottles and cans go in one, and the garbage goes in the other one. Because when I first moved out here, we didn't do that. But now it's like a habit for everybody. When the garbage day comes, you see the recyclables on one side, you see the garbage on the other side. I think we could move towards that with the compost. And just like you said, just do it with the compost. You have your compost, your recycling, and your garbage. I think that people will start to do it more if they just go ahead and start putting in the brown bins. Because when they start putting in the brown bins, I bought the recyclable, the biodegradable plastic bags. I put recyclables in there. with the brown bags, and I thought it was a good idea. So I'm gonna move on to the last question, so we have time for some questions and answers. And this last question is: in the next 5 years, how do you see? What's your vision in the next 5 years? How you see recyclable and going? I mean, or with the waste management going? I'll go with all right, Eric, and then we'll go to Faye, and Diane should be back by then.
Boy, in the next 5 years, well, first of all, I hope that we have a peak in worldwide greenhouse gas emissions and it starts to fall, so that hopefully we can reverse these terrible weather events that are plaguing us every year. I'd love to see all those diesel garbage trucks replaced with electric garbage trucks.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see that electricity created by wind and solar rather than by coal and natural gas and oil. Those garbage trucks going long distances with, full of things that could be recycled, not only the food scraps and the organic waste, but also the electronics. I mentioned the refrigerants and air conditioners and things like that. I'd love to see almost nothing going out of state in those garbage trucks. I'd love to see an elimination of the incineration of garbage in all respects, or whatever they call it, chemical, whatever silly words they came up with. But I loved what Assemblymember Engelbright said about combustion is combustion. Burning is burning. You can dress it up and greenwash it all you like, but let's stop doing that. Let's stop letting food turn into methane. Let's stop trucking our garbage out of state and wasting, hundreds and thousands of gallons of diesel fuel to do that. I'd love to see commercial refrigerators and commercial HVAC systems recycled. I know we do that residentially now. You can't put a refrigerator out on the curb until you drain it of the refrigerant. I'd love to see that extended to commercial sites as well. And of course, basically replace those high greenhouse gas refrigerants with low CO2 equivalent refrigerants. So, a few things, some of them incremental, some of them revolutionary, but the vehicles going electric, the electric going green, the garbage being separated and recycled, not burned, and brighter skies, the birds are chirping, and cleaner streets, and less noise, happiness. Check.
Faith?
Well, Eric, I can't even pick it back on that. You said a mouthful, and you have covered everything. About 5 years from now, I like to see love and a better environment, and people know to enjoy their green space and the atmosphere. And well, you have said enough for me, Eric. And birds chirping. As a matter of fact, I like to watch the skies, beautiful skies, especially when the clouds is mixed with the blue background, and better air, better breathing. As asthma is and respiratory is down because of all these chemicals that's burning in our air, in our atmosphere. So, all of these things, and people are living longer, but it's with the chemical, I don't know if it's the medicine they're getting, why they're living longer or what, but I think we could live to like Abraham, he lived to 900 years. So a better opening of air into the air, in the environment. Asthma has been diminished, and all of these respiratory things diminished because of all these toxic that we are inhaling. That's what I'd like to see in another 5 years, which I'm asking too much, because at the rate we're going, I don't know if it'd be done in 50 years.
I think realistically for me, it would just be greater community building around this topic and conversation. It's such a politically charged conversation, right? As much as more than it is a human conversation. So I think, realistically, there's so much that we cannot physically do to reverse the damage that we've already done. We can't rewind the time, but we can redeem the time. And I think a lot of it will have to do with how we just interact on a human level. So I think if we understood that and came to that place, it will accelerate the work that we need to do. So 5 years from now, hopefully we're just more understanding and willing to work with one another.
Okay, so listen, I appreciate what you guys have done, what you're doing, and then the work you're putting out there. And as soon as I can, I'm gonna give you one of them plug-in cars. So I have the solar panels.
Charles, if I could interject.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're on mute, Ms. Hill. Ms. Hill, you're on mute.
Ms. Hill, you're on mute. Unmute yourself, Ms. Hill.
Sorry.
There you go. No, no, do it again. No, push that button again.
Oh my God.
There you go.
As a non-for-profit organization, we get discretionary funds from our elected officials. But it's so, as I mentioned earlier, it's so gruesome, that if you're not level-headed or focused, you'll just say, forget it. The barrier that we come against these discretionary funds, if we are working as a grassroots person without no money, as Diana just said, she took money out of her own pocket. Now, if we, like, for example, I bought pizza for my volunteers and it was $75, and to get that $75, my God, I said, let me give it back to them. So it's the barriers that we have to go on as advocates and grassroots people. It's so politicized that it's sometimes it's so frustrating. I just wanted to check that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So, like I said, I appreciate you guys coming out today and sharing your experiences and letting us know what can be done, what needs to be done, and what should be done. So, I'm going to turn this back over to Ms. Barbara Brown and Gloria Charles to close it out with the questions.
Thank you so much, Charles. And that was great, and glad to see all the wonderful things our panelists are doing. In the interest of time, we'll take 1 or 2 questions because we're hitting up it's 12:29 now. So please raise your hand if you have a question or a very brief comment. And I guess Mary Arnold. Take Mary Arnold, and then if there's one other, we'll take that. Mary.
Okay. This is for Steve Caruso. Steve, you've heard how onerous it is for these groups to access, resources that they need. I know that DSNY gives, bags and you come and pick up after a cleanup, but what is your suggestion for, how this could be done with, city or state funding that would be much easier? These people are just using it to buy simple things, food or water or, whatever.
Hi, Mary. More than happy to answer that question. So as the citywide community affairs officer, my team and I are actually the ones responsible for scheduling all of the volunteer cleanups. We work out all the logistics. We set the volunteers up with the depots where they could go borrow the tools, get the bags and the gloves. With Commissioner Tisch now here, I know that she had mentioned again a little bit earlier that she just wants to rethink how we look at some of the programs that we currently have. That's definitely been a topic of discussion. How we can make it easier for the volunteers, how we can make it more convenient for the volunteers, and how we could get the people that are doing a lot of the work, the boots on the ground, how we could get them what they need. So what we did was a year and a half ago, during COVID, the Sanitation Foundation gifted us a van along with tools. So at times, I now have the ability to go on out and meet the volunteers. This way they don't have to go out and pick up the tools. I'll give them the bags, I'll give them the gloves, I'll give them all the supplies that they need. As of right now, we only have 1 cleanup van. I have an office SUV, which I've taken some of the tools out of my van and put them into the office SUV. so that we could take on multiple events for one day. But something that I want to do, and I don't know if it's going to be reality, but I was hoping that if I had the ability to expand my team, we could just make it a little bit easier by going out and meeting a lot of the volunteers on site, and all they would have to do is bring the folks, and we bring everything else. But again, definitely a topic of discussion and something that we're going to bring to the commissioner and present to her, and hope that maybe she could help us to expand upon the program.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, I would really like to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank our panelists, both our panel 1 and panel 2. This has been a really robust conversation. And I think the thing that recommends this conversation is that it's been on all levels. It's from the macro to the micro, from our representatives, our agencies, to people in the community, because we really all have to work together in partnership. We need to collaborate to achieve any kind of a goal. And an essential piece of it, which I don't think the word bureaucracy was used, but we need to cut out some of the bureaucratic red tape that people on the ground encounter as they try to help get us to zero waste, or as they try to help us to realize the goals of whether it's their city, state, or federal goals. So I want to thank everybody who's participated in this conversation. I want to thank our sponsors, our co-sponsors, which in the interest of time, I will not mention the names again. I want to thank the committee. And I don't have all the committee names in front of me, but maybe Gloria Boyce-Charles will do that. But Gloria, who's chaired this effort, I really want to thank her, because she has pulled together all angles of this topic to make sure that we had a very valid kind of a conversation. So thank you to everyone. Gloria, do you want to close us out with any other remarks?
Yes, okay, thank you so much. And to our moderators, and to Michael Scotland, I'm sorry you didn't get to ask that question. We'll try to get that handled for you another time. I owe you one. But thank you for sticking in here with us and staying with us, for your support all along. Our team members include Mary Arnold, from Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board, Charles Davis from Rosedale Civic Association, Mac Lawrence from the Office of Councilwoman Sylvina Brooks Powers, Jasmine McPherson from Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board, Andrea Scarborough from Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board, and Derek Warmington from Springfield Rosedale Community Action Association. And our technology person, oh, okay, I didn't start my video, sorry. And our technology person has been all along, Michael Scotland. He's done an excellent job of spotlighting people and moving in and out of different spaces with folks, and Darlene Peoples, who couldn't join us today. So thank you to all the committee members, and thank you to the audience who stuck with us. Thank you to our guest speakers today and our moderators. Look in the chat for some helpful links. We'd like for you to fill out a Google form that gives us some feedback about today's session. We'd really appreciate that, so that we can do things bigger and better for you going forward. And there's lots of links in there. There's the link to the film that Diana Rose made. There's the link to places that you can go to do organics drop-offs. And take the Zero Waste Pledge. There's a link to the Zero Waste website on the Sanitation Department's website, and you can take the Zero Waste Pledge. So without further ado, thank you so much. Be well, God bless, and keep talking trash.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
And if you have children, remember Eastern Queens Alliance is sponsoring a reptile show this afternoon at 3:15 at the Idlewild Environmental Center at 149th Avenue and Springfield Lane. So if you have children, well, you don't have to have children. If you just like reptiles and you want to see a whole range of them, including, I think there's an alligator there, come out. That'll be an hour's program. If you want to see this program again, it's on YouTube. So if you want to see yourself speaking, it's on YouTube. But thank you again. And good night.
Good job, guys. Bye-bye. Good evening.
Bye.